Noah built the ark out of gopher wood. The flood it came and the ark it stood. And Noah's ark's a moving, a moving, a moving. And Noah's ark's a moving, a moving along. Who built the ark? Oh, Noah, Noah. Now who built the ark? Oh, Noah, my Lord. Noah's ark's a moving, a moving, a moving. Noah's ark's a moving along. He marched the animals 2 by 2, the hippopotamus and the kangaroo.
I'm Chris Breslin for Bob Crawford. This is RTN Theology number 31. Really excited to present this episode, which was originally aired as a conversation between Bob and Bishop Eugene Robinson, who's the chaplain of the Chautauqua Institute in New York. Normally they have this amazing slate of summer programming that was set to involve the Avett Brothers concert performance, but a lot of that was derailed with the pandemic. But Bob still got to sit down with Bishop Robinson, who's well known in the Episcopal Church and has had a long career of service in the church, and really parse through some of the ways that Bob has lived his faith on stage and his faith story. So it's really inspiring always to bear testimony to the way God has shown up to us in times of suffering, in times like now of uncertainty. And so this is really kind of a testimony episode. We hope that you enjoy it. We hope that you'll dig into some of Chautauqua Institute's other programming and some of their resources.
Thunder and cold, that's how you came in through the door of the imminent frame, scrubbing our feet, turning over tables, cups of cold water, born in a stable. With a sword, then laid it down, crushing the empire, the marker's crown, a sweet little baby bundled and swaddled, the devil embarrassed, the innocent coddled.
This program was made possible by the Lincoln Ethics Series, funded by the David and Joan Lincoln Family Fund for Applied Ethics, and the Carnahan-Jackson Religious Lectureship.
Welcome to our Chautauqua Assembly audience. I'm Bishop Gene Robinson, and I serve Chautauqua Institution as Vice President of Religion and Senior Pastor. It's my privilege to welcome you to this Interfaith Lecture Series program, although today we take a break from our week's theme to present an extra special conversation. You see, today would have been the day we presented one of the biggest concerts of the summer with the incredibly popular Avett Brothers gracing our amphitheater stage for the 3rd time. And in advance of that show, thanks to deep connections we've made with the band led by Deborah Sonia Moore, Chautauqua's Vice President of Performing and Visual Arts, we were set to welcome Bob Crawford and possibly other members of the Avett Brothers to our Hall of Philosophy for a conversation on their faith journeys and how their faith informs their artistic lives. But obviously we can't gather for either of these programs in person this year, but we're pleased to share that Chautauqua has already rescheduled the Avett Brothers to join us next summer on Wednesday, August 4th, 2021, in our amphitheater for another great concert. And I'm personally delighted to share that we've salvaged that conversation as part of the Interfaith Lecture Series for our audiences joining us today. And so it's my privilege to welcome Bob Crawford to our CHQ Assembly platform today. Bob plays upright bass guitar, fiddle, and on rare occasions, I'm told, the trumpet for the Avett Brothers. Though Bob is not related to Seth or Scott, he is a founding member of the band and I think considers himself a brother anyway. Bob is also co-host of the podcast The Road to Now with Dr. Benjamin Sawyer, in which the pair attempts to make sense of our place in the world through our own personal experiences and our unique narratives. And Lord knows we could all use a little of that. Bob is also the managing director at the Press On Fund, a charitable organization aimed at identifying feasible and groundbreaking alternative therapies for childhood cancers and to invest in the science and infrastructure needed to cure childhood cancer within our lifetime. An avid reader, he is currently pursuing his master's degree in history, and today's program is a live conversation that will be available on demand on CHQ Assembly and then later on Bob's RTN Theology podcast, an offshoot of The Road to Now, in which he and Reverend Chris Breslin host twice-monthly conversations in faith, art, religion, and theology. It is my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you, Bob Crawford, to CHQ Assembly.
Gene, it is a pleasure to be here. I am honored. I'm glad that we could still make this happen. Even though we're living in the times that we are. Speaking of Reverend Chris Breslin, he said to me today, he said, make sure you call him Bishop. But you told me I don't have to call you Bishop.
That's right. You don't have to call me Bishop. I look forward to meeting him as well.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guy. You would love him. Absolutely.
Well, and we certainly want to welcome your podcast audience, and I hope they enjoy this. What I'm thinking is that you and I will enjoy it, and we hope that people will enjoy listening in on this conversation. So, as I warned you, I want to start just by asking you, did you grow up in a particular faith tradition, and what was that like?
Sure. I grew up, I was raised Catholic. I was baptized just a few months old and went through my penance and my first Holy Communion, and I made my confirmation, and then we stopped going to church. And it was my father was had a Scottish. I mean, my father's parents were immigrants that met in Atlantic City. His father was from Scotland, and he was a Protestant until he met, so that's Robert Crawford, my Robert Crawford. I'm a junior. My father, who passed away a couple months ago, is senior. And then my grandfather was Robert Crawford, so I named my son Samuel, of course. But Robert Crawford came to Atlantic City in the late 20s. He met Josephine McCullough, who was a Catholic from Ireland. And they fell in love, and he converted to Catholicism for my grandmother. And so we were raised, my father was raised in a strict Catholic family. And my father always said that actually it was my grandfather who was the more devout Catholic. He was on his knees praying every night. But my father suffered some of that, right? He suffered the overbearing of faith in a family and the wielding of faith, not always, sometimes people wield faith to wield power over another person. Go figure, right? So that, I think, scarred him a little bit. He was always a believer, and always took his faith seriously and always carried it with him. But I think it led to some of the trauma that he experienced in life. We would go the Saturday. Often we would go to the Saturday afternoon mass, and we would sit in the back. And when they went up for communion, we would leave. So, and then always on Christmas and Easter. So I was exposed to the faith. I had a love for Christ at a very early age. I always felt close to God. But I think it's the thing about Christianity, whatever your faith is, people, it's easy to get disconnected from God. It's easy to feel disconnected from God. And some people question the value of going to church. And I think it's prayer and attending church are of the same, value, in that human beings need routine and we need to practice things. And the more we practice things, the better we get at things, right? And so it's a matter of the faith muscle. It's keeping the faith muscle strong, so when you need it, it's there for you, right? So a quick story on this, and I don't want to get too far off my upbringing, but I think it's relevant. My father passed away 5 months ago yesterday.
I'm sorry.
And thank you. And he had been ailing for a while, and I was in the hospital with him. But then the end comes suddenly, right? So we were about to leave for the Dominican Republic, the band, to play. And the week before, he became critically ill, and I went to visit him in the hospital. And I was sitting there, and I go through these periods where just what I said, where my faith is very accessible. The what you get from prayer, feeling close to God. I go through these days, weeks, months where it's right there, and then I go through these periods where I'm praying. I'm reading the Bible, I'm reading theologians, but I'm not feeling God. I'm not feeling God, right? Where are you? Where are you, God? So here I was, kind of a period of that where I'm not feeling God, but then thrust into this critical situation for my father. The realization, sitting there with him, they were still trying things to save him, but I couldn't. I would watch him, and he was on a ventilator and dialysis, and I couldn't see the way out for him. I couldn't see. He had made so many incredible comebacks over the past 12 years, one after another. Just when you thought, this could be it, he always seemed to pull through, but I couldn't. I believed, the family, we all believed he was gonna pull through from this one, but I was sitting there and I couldn't rationalize the way he was gonna do that, and my faith was there. Like, I needed it, and it was there because that muscle, even though I would read the Bible and I wouldn't feel God close to me, I would pray, I wouldn't feel God close to me, but because you're exercising that, because you're moving towards that, you may not feel God every day. When you're sitting in church, you may feel like this is a waste of time, or I have other things to do, or you may be in church and you may be thinking about other things you want to do, you'd rather be doing, places you'd rather be. You may say a prayer, and sometimes it's just, you feel like you're talking to yourself. But
I think sometimes we let those muscles atrophy, and then when we feel a need for them, they fail us because we haven't used them in so long.
Yeah, we were at a point. This has been this pandemic, right? It's really hard to complain about what I'm suffering or what I have suffered when A, we're all suffering together. B, some people are really suffering.
Yeah.
They're suffering. They've lost a loved one. They're on a ventilator. Some people are on ventilators for 2 or 3 weeks. maybe longer. The long-term effects of this virus are still yet unknown, and there are people who felt like they've been sick for 6 months. There are people who are in dire straits financially. So we have a special needs child. She's a full-time gig as it is, and then we have a 9-year-old son, and my wife and I. We've gone through, every day is a peak and a valley. It seems like, there are moments when you're like, I have not been home this long in 19 years. I will never regret this. This is beautiful that we get to share this. Then there are parts of the day where we're just on our last nerve, at our wit's end. And one day I just wasn't right. And she was, what's wrong with you? And I said, I am trying to find joy in things when I need to be finding joy in God. And it was right there. Like, that's the bottom line. Whenever I'm having a bad day, or whenever I'm feeling like my ego's been hurt or my pride's been hurt, that's it. That's pretty much it, right? You're seeking joy in something that's not God. Augustine had it right.
Yeah,
that's it.
Imagine that. So,
right.
So Hallie is your daughter, and it was, I believe, when she was 2 years old that she was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Did that change your understanding of God or your perception of God? And how so? Sure. Yeah. So again, almost like this connects to the way I was raised, the faith, because when I finished confirmation, it was almost like, okay, we're done with church. That was it. Graduated.
We stopped.
Yeah.
I graduated. Hey, with my dad, it was almost in some ways like a lot of our church life. Although my parents are both believers, and they're prayers, but the physical nature of going to church and participating in that respect ended with me graduating, being confirmed, because it was almost like there was a pressure from my father, from his mother and father, to make sure his kids did all these things, jump through these hoops. So as I got into, my late teen years and then into my 20s, it kind of fell off for me as far as faith fell off. And I sought things of the personal satisfaction and all that, but I didn't, the soul satisfaction. I was more interested in Eastern faiths like Buddhism. And I think what you do is we have a tendency to seek out a faith that's going to fit what we want to do in our life and how we want to behave.
Right.
And so, right. So we and even if you are a Christian, and I'm sure, again, other faiths, people do this in other faiths where I like this part and I like this part and I'm not too sure about that part. And so it was at that age and period of my life, I was just kind of seeking to justify my pleasure. But when Hallie got sick, my wife and I, she was raised in Church of Christ. She's from North Carolina. I'm a South Jersey Catholic. We didn't practice a faith together at that point. We had started to pray, not oddly enough, but we started to pray a little bit the month or two before my daughter got sick. Little did we know she was sick, and we just didn't know it. But when she got sick, I was on a plane coming back from Europe at the end of a 3-week tour. And literally, like, the plane landed, I turned on my phone, and my daughter's just been rushed to the hospital because she was having a seizure in her crib, and my wife found her there. And so the minute it was a 2-hour drive from the airport to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, the first thing I did was gather everyone who had come, family and friends, to hold vigil and ask that we could all hold hands and pray. And that was it. that was my moment of conversion. And so she was in a coma for a while, and we did 6 weeks in the PICU. And I was just praying all the time. A friend of my wife's old boss brought us these Catholic prayer books, and our Bonnie Rini, who's Scott and Seth's sister, her husband Nick gave me his grandfather's old rosary beads. And I was off and running, pretty much that. But this time, it was, though I was saying the rosary every day, 3 or 4 times a day, I was approaching my conversion, in retrospect, more as a Protestant than a Catholic.
Uh-huh.
As in that I was spending just more time, I think, in the Word and more of a direct connection with God. Now I'm moving back to Catholicism in some ways, but guided by my wife. But we may just stop at Episcopalian and just say, that's close enough.
Welcome. Come on home.
That's right.
I think sometimes people come to church for God, and we give them religion instead. And I think religion is a poor substitute for God. And your journey about discovering this real relationship with God, and then putting that back together with the various parts of your religion, that works well. But the religion by itself, I think, is not anything like having a relationship with God.
Oh, absolutely not. It is, again, it's the religion alone can be used to justify things personally or on a national scale or a corporate scale that run contrary to faith, to the gospel, absolutely contrary to the gospel.
We are walking to Zion, out of Babylon, on a journey to a sacred place. Not sacred for religion, not sacred for tradition, sacred 'cause we'll dwell with our God. Fire smoking below, the curse thunders round. He suffered hostility, the curse's pressure weighted. We battered his side, smote him to the ground. Christ to the cross, Spirit to us. Take me to liberty. For an island like John the Revelator's, resting in the Spirit with our Maker. We're desperate for a broom tree, a land of milk and honey, a Sabbath from the buzz and pageantry.
So I want to mention something in one of your songs. This goes back to, I think, the year after Hallie got sick. And it's from the song Live and Die, which is on your Carpenter album. And this lyric, probably people have brought it up to you 1,000 times, but the lyric is, "You can say goodbye to how we had it planned." And something struck me about that line as being incredibly true. And as someone who's 73 years old, I find that getting older involves saying goodbye to a lot of things that you thought you would do, but you realize I'm actually never going to do that, or I can't long distance run anymore, or whatever. Talk about how you made peace with giving up some of what you had planned, particularly as it relates to Hallie.
Yeah, well, first of all, Seth wrote that line, Seth Avett, and a while back he told me he thinks of Hallie every time he sings it, but that may have changed since, but that was a while back. But he told me that, and that was really sweet. That's an ongoing process, Gene. That is like accepting what happened and loving the Hallie that exists. Though she's radically different than the Hallie that was born and given to us by God. That takes that peaks and valleys. Again, same thing. It's like she is just a gem, and that's not even the right. There isn't a word to express how precious Hallie is today. You know, she lost the right side of her brain. She doesn't walk. There's many things that she can't do for herself. She is, I would say, 4 or 5 intellectually. Well, you know, there's 10-year-old Hallie, and then there's 5-year-old Hallie, and then there's Grandma Hallie. Like there's these different versions of her that kind of pop up, but she's just so delightful. I mean, she's just so. You have to say when I'm sad for the things that won't be for her, and when that hurts, and it hurts me, and I'm sure it hurts my wife. When those times are upon me, the goal is to just be in Hallie's world, because if you can get into her world, that the Hallie that's there in front of you and the way she sees the world, if you can play on her field rather than trying to get her to play on your field, it's a glorious place. It's a great place. Yeah. There was one time during the worst of this where I just prayed that she would know joy, because we were being told she'd never sit up. She'd be on a trach and a feeding tube for the rest of her life, that if she survived the cancer, which was terrible. And, you know, of course, all pediatric brain tumors are rare and deadly, and so it just wasn't looking good. And I just prayed that she would know joy, no matter what her abilities were or weren't. And she's just got that. She's got that covered. She's one of the most joyful beings you can ever be around. She's also a pain in the butt, and she's very demanding, and she's a diva. So you know, she's great.
So it strikes me that what you describe about your way of being with her, we could all learn from, right? Where all of us are trying to get the entire world to play on our playing field, and when you make those kinds of demands on people, most people are not willing to play on your field, right? And so that effort to be in that person's world and to be present to that seems to me something to long for. I mean, I'm wondering if that at all relates to the name of your podcast, the Road to Now. I mean, it just seems to me that being in the now is really hard. In my own life, I'm either feeling really bad about everything I didn't do well in the past, and I'm anxious about doing well in the future, and and I miss the now. In premarital counseling with couples, I will say to them, I don't want you to miss your wedding. I mean, I know your bodies will be there, but you have no idea how easy it is to miss your own wedding, because you're either worrying about, have they really decorated the hall the way I wanted it, or is the cake going to be nice and moist, or is it going to be all dried out, or you're wondering about your future together, or the people you said no to. It's all about in the past and in the future. And I talk to them about trying to actually be present for their own wedding, because you only get one shot at it.
Yeah, well, the thing with Hallie is she's been saved from this, right? She's in the moment. She lives completely in the moment. And there all that weight that's on all of us to perform. And I mean like perform in life and have a good job and make money and be successful and have people like us, and all this is just weighs us down, and it is the root of all our problems and our woes. She's free of that. She's not carrying that. When she's not happy, she's not happy. But she's not happy. She's not happy because she's not happy now. She's not upset because of what happened 3 years ago when she was really mean to somebody, or she's not upset because she's worried that she's not going to get, score a perfect score in her SATs and get into a great college. No, she's not happy because, just something's not right at this moment. And so there is something to be said for her as an example of living in the present. Yeah. And getting to the history podcast, the road to now is about the idea that historically, history is contingent. It's contingent. And so what is it that brought you here today? And what is it that brought brought me here today? It was not a good score in English. But what brought our country to the moment that we're in as well? What were the events that when stacked upon each other led us to this moment, this pandemic, this presidency, this moment of great racial unrest and corporate suffering that we're all engaged in together.
Yeah, I want to go back to something we were talking about before, but I want to pick up first just on that, about COVID-19 and our experience with that. When you and I were talking earlier, you mentioned this book that you had read about the Spanish flu 100 years ago, and how it seems that people treat each other much less well in a pandemic. And rather than sort of increasing our compassion and our reaching out to others, it's quite the opposite. So what do you think we, America, will learn from this pandemic?
Well, we have to learn something. I mean, that's the fear is that we don't. That's the worst case scenario. After however many people will have died from this, and we're at 140,000 today, and probably that's an undercount. John Barry wrote the book The Great Influenza. John Barry, Barry, and he says in it that the counts were terrible. The statistics were awful. A lot of people that died of the influenza, the what we call the Spanish flu, which was actually believed to have begun on an American military base in Kansas, but we call it the Spanish flu because they were the only country that reported it accurately. The United States didn't report it accurately. No other country did, but the Spanish. So that's why we.
So it might be like the China virus.
It is, yeah, but that would be, you call it the China virus if you believe that China is accurately reporting what's going on, and they probably aren't. So it's probably more accurate to call it COVID-19, but it's also less racist. But so, it was a similar situation where there was arguments over wearing masks. You had some cities were hit really, really bad by it. Others did better. I think San Francisco did an excellent job. The public health officials in San Francisco did a wonderful job, whereas Philadelphia did a terrible job. But people at the lower end of the economic spectrum suffered greatly, and people weren't very nice to one another during this. And I think that it comes down to a situation of self-preservation, and it's we are lifting up our frontline workers as we should, and we are praising them, and we were trying to support them with love and prayer and the equipment that they need to do their job. But the fact is, and we can see it, and boy, it's an election year. I've been meaning to go back and look at, that was a midterm election year. 1918 was a midterm election for Woodrow Wilson. And apparently Woodrow Wilson did not speak. We were in the middle of World War I, so he really didn't talk about it a whole lot. But I'm curious of what that midterm looked like in 1918. But it's the perfect storm. We have a pandemic. We have a leader who I can't see how anyone could argue that he just is not a typical leader, right? He's abnormal, is what you can say. Probably even if you support him, you say he's abnormal. And then you have a once in a lifetime pandemic. And because of the pandemic, we're all at home watching TV, and you have George Floyd murdered. And finally, we all see it, and we're all horrified by it. So now you have the realization by many whites like myself that we've lived this privileged life, and we can't understand what it's like to walk in the shoes of an African American. And so now you have a lot of people finally supporting Black Lives Matter and finally supporting real civil rights change in this country. And it's just like, what a brew, what a brew this is that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. It's just very disorienting, and none of us have an experience like this to have a roadmap with it.
You built us a house on a mountain, and it won't budge. Overlooking a river, clear and cool. You ask for nothing, yet I still won't back to move. The king of the earth stacks the law for the serfs. A righteous flame fueled by shame. It was me hiding in those bushes in the Garden of Eden. It was me at the base of Sinai kissing that golden calf. It should have been me going up that mountain with Abraham, but instead it was you. Should have been me going up that mountain at Calvary, but you're the one with the wounds. You're the one with the wounds.
So let me go back for a second because I think it does relate. So in my life, I feel like the times when I am under or in the middle of the greatest distress, or that I am the most fearful, or I am up against the greatest challenge or whatever, that the gold lining in that dark cloud is it just seems easier to be in touch with God. Or maybe it's that it's easier for God to get through to me when I'm already beaten down and my usual defenses against that stuff. I think of the Beatitudes in Matthew's Gospel, which everybody seems to love, which I don't understand, because every situation that's laid out there, right? Blessed are those who mourn, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. I mean, all the blessed are situations that nobody would want. So what makes you blessed if you have them? And it seems to me that when you are in dire straits, like some of those situations, God has a real chance to get through to us. And I'm just wondering if you think that's true, and was that true in the years following Hallie's hospitalization and her sickness?
Absolutely. It's when Hallie got sick, it was literally all we had. All we had was God, and it was the rock, right? God was our rock, and it was also the one piece of rock that we could stand on, surrounded by an ocean. And it's because you're finally listening. You're finally listening when you've had everything swept out from under you. When you can no longer. I remember praying some days. We went. Hallie was at UNC, and she was in the intensive care unit. Then we knew we had to take her to cancer treatment, and we took her to a rehab before her cancer treatment. And we're at this rehab facility in Charlotte, and we learned that her original cancer diagnosis is not what we thought it was. And although what we thought it was, an ependymoma, was absolutely awful, we were told that it was actually this astrocytoma glioma that was worse. That was worse. So it's like we had a little shot to save her, and now suddenly they're telling us, we're being told that we have no shot to save her. And that's when we went to St. Jude. That's when my wife, we got a prayer card one day. We were at the rehab facility. The day after, we got this terrible, terrible news that was a gut punch that completely, we had a plan in place. We're like, okay, here's our plan. We're going to go to Jacksonville, Florida. We're going to get proton radiation. We had everything set up. We had a place to stay. We had a means of transportation. Everything was ready to go. And then that was completely taken out from under us. And the next morning, my wife was going through our mail, and she found a card from my Aunt Nancy in Hamilton, New Jersey, and there was a St. Jude prayer card in there. And my wife said, I want to go to St. Jude. She's like, I want to go to St. Jude. And we didn't know what they would offer. We didn't know how to get Hallie there, accepted there. And so over a weekend, we got Hallie accepted into St. Jude, but she had to be there within 48 hours. And so our business manager for the band, they reached out to a bus company. They sent a bus to Charlotte to pick us up, to take us to Memphis. And we were packing. It was this like frantic, 8 hours of completely packing to relocate to go to Memphis, which we knew no one in Memphis. We were just literally going on faith. We didn't even know what we would find once we got there. We had a 2-month-old son at the time. And I remember packing up her hospital room in Charlotte to our van and asking God to make my steps for me, because I couldn't walk anymore. I couldn't walk. I thought I was just going to collapse with the stress and the fear and the anxiety and the hopelessness. And I prayed, God, you need to make these steps, because I can't do it. It's like the being carried. I need you to carry me. And so, that the faith took center stage of our lives for a long time. And then you get back, you find a stasis, you find a period of normalcy, and then that becomes more difficult. When I went back to the Ava Brothers when I took a year off, but when I would go and play a gig here and there, I'd get on the bus and they're talking about restaurants, nice restaurants, and $100 pairs of jeans. And I just, guys, I don't get this. I don't understand this. And then a year later, you get this period of stasis and things are okay. And you're talking about nice restaurants and expensive clothes and all this kind of stuff. And we seek the ignorance. We seek the ignorance. And when we get slowed down, which we're all right now, we're all slowed down. When this first started going on, think back to the moment you were told, you heard that everything was going to be canceled, that you had to keep in your house. You think you're going to work. You're not going to work. You're not going to go work out. You're not going to go to the mall. You're not going to go to that restaurant with your friend. You're not. Think about that, what that felt like in here when you first heard that and you realized kids are getting out of school. Like this is something we've never experienced. Well, for my wife and I, it's like, yeah, we know what this is like. We know this. The moment everything just completely changes, when what you planned, what you thought, what you expected would be there no longer is. And so my life of faith now is bouncing between that, right? I mean, if you talk to my wife, I'm scared, right? I'm scared about the pandemic. She's right. By the way, this is factual, but I'm just saying, like, she would point this out about me, that I'm scared, right? I'm living with fear. I'm voicing my fear regularly. I'm angry, right? I'm angry because, by golly, it doesn't need to be like this. And I'm helpless. I feel helpless. I feel that there's nothing I can really do about it. The only thing I can do about it is protect my family by saying we can't go anywhere. That's the only thing. And I'm living in fear, and I am on some days I'm an object of I'm spreading fear because it's radiating. So how can that person be in communication with God? Because if you would think if you're in communication with God and you have a healthy relationship with God, that doesn't exist. The fear doesn't exist, right? But reality is the God that we believe in died on a cross, suffered a fate that we can't even comprehend. And so it's the idea of, I may seem like I'm losing it and I'm real anxious, but I believe in a man who bore an unimaginable pain for my salvation, and I get it. I get it all. But some days I can be sitting here talking to you about Henry Nouwen or Thomas Merton and how they just make it all seem so simple and easy and it's glorious. But other days, I don't want anybody to leave the house. I'm going to wipe down every Amazon package that arrives here.
So somebody brought you a Catholic prayer book. I'm going to bring you the Episcopal prayer book. There's a section in it, a very, very small section of prayers for someone who is sick to pray. And at the very bottom of the page, there's like a 3-line prayer that's just one of my favorites of all time. And it says, if this, then that, if this, then that. And the last line is, and if the answer to this prayer is that I have to lie here, just lie here, help me lie here boldly. Help me to do nothing boldly. And I think, there's a kernel of hope in there in terms of the pandemic, that we could feel good about the doing nothing because it's what's going to save countless lives out there, right? It's not that we're doing nothing. We're doing nothing boldly, which actually accomplishes something. And I think one of the definitions of depression is when you feel helpless. Like I'm in a very bad state, and there is just simply nothing I can do about it. But there's always something we can do. And sometimes, and maybe in this pandemic, part of the something we need to do is get okay with not doing anything.
Pilgrims, though we be in this strange, strange land, come to the table, let us sup and sing. Pilgrims, though we be in this strange, strange land, our God is King.
Gene, I'd like to ask you a question. How are you counseling? One of the big challenges with the pandemic is dealing with our children. And I have, a 9-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter. Who we've talked a lot about Hallie, but my son he handled this whole experience so well for so long. But how long can you be separated from other kids and this and that? And he really has risen to the challenge. But how do we counsel? How do you counsel your parishioners to counsel their own children during a time like this?
So when all else fails, tell the truth. Is sort of something I live by, or I try to live by. And it is always amazing to me how we're trying to shield one another from the truth. but especially with our kids, right? I mean, my two girls are grown now, and I've got two granddaughters, but our natural reaction is to always try to shield them from some things. And with children, I think sometimes we underestimate their ability to handle the truth. And so we try to either minimize the truth or just completely lie about it. So, one of the things that I think parents should be doing, is being honest with themselves about how hard this is, right? I was reading the other day, someone was saying, parents maybe never appreciated their children's teachers before, but now they do, right? So to be honest with yourself about how hard this is, but I think to be honest with your kids about how hard this is, and to see this as some training that they're going to either benefit from or not later in their lives, because there are going to be other hard things they have to do. And so I think talking to them, letting them know that it's okay for them to not be all that happy about this, because you aren't either. And so to allow that to be said, and then together talk with them about the feeling like there's nothing you can do. Like, talk to them. Let's figure out something that you can do that makes you feel, like you're the one candle in the dark, right? But it's some light. But I also think it's a great time in terms of faith. It's a great time to remind ourselves and our kids that God never promises to take this difficulty away. God just promises to be with us in it and to never leave us. And the learning there that your kids will come to know at some point, and you probably already know, is that it's just enough. God's being there with you is just enough. It doesn't make it all right, but it's enough. And so I think as parents, or just as adults, as citizens in the world, we ought to be asking, what's to be learned from this virus? Not from the virus, but from this experience of having to just give up most of everything. The first 2 weeks were really fun. The first 2 weeks were like awesome, but pretty soon thereafter, it was not so awesome. And here at Chautauqua, we went through this difficult thing about giving up our in-person, on-the-ground season, and then to ask the question, so what are we going to do with this? And creating this CHQ Assembly was a way of our doing something in the face of all of this loss. And I just think that's a great lesson to teach your kids. I think it's a great lesson to teach your spouse, or to learn from your spouse and to learn it together. So I think we ought to be asking, what are we meant to learn from this? It's not that God caused the virus or that God causes all these deaths, but my faith tells me that God can bring something good out of anything bad. That's what Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter is all about. So not a bad time to teach that.
This virus connects us to our biblical ancestors, to the things that they endured. Something I really want to ask you, and I like to ask all faith leaders of this, is, every history podcast we do, I do actually every theology podcast, and I also do a podcast called Politics of Truth, which was basically the original mission was to look at the intersection of music and politics during the 2020 campaign. Now, obviously, we got a couple episodes in, and the world flipped on us. But
right.
But we still do it. We do it every other week. But every conversation on all these podcasts, there is a very, you walk a fine line because of the attitudes and the belief systems of the guests all seem to be believing that Donald Trump is the problem, right? And God, he has done some terrible thing. He is the problem in a lot of ways. He is. That's kind of true. But what I find, we do these Sunday night road to nows, and we have to be careful because they become 45 minutes of people kicking Donald Trump. Doesn't matter what the topic is. It always gets to that. And it's factually, I can't separate myself from saying, yeah, this is all right. I mean, everything that the person is saying about this guy is accurate, about how just, man, he just does not seem like a good person. But how do we, but the gospel is it's the, how can we be walking in the path of Jesus and stand up against what we know is wrong, but do it in a way where we don't become the evil, right? Like we're facing evil, but sometimes sometimes in order to defeat evil, you become evil. And how do you counsel against that? What is the mechanism to stand up in the middle of just a Donald Trump, hate fest and say, how can I call out the evil, but do it with love? Yeah.
So whatever else is true about the president, I think this is what we have needed from him that we've not gotten, which is, it seems to me that leadership is, whether it be of a small nonprofit or a corporation or leading a nation, a leader is the person whose job it is in a difficult situation to hold the hands of those being led and to assure them that things are going to be all right and that they're going to live through it, right? Now, and by live through it, I don't necessarily mean that we're assured of not catching the virus and dying. What I mean is that when we're in the middle of a situation like this, it's very easy to be so despondent, to just see no way out. And we look to people to reassure us. I mean, I think that's why people all over the country were watching Governor Cuomo every day, because he just exuded this I would not call it confidence. I would actually call it hope, which of course is a religious word. But when you listen to him and you saw how he was conducting himself in the midst of, the horror that was going on in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, you came away thinking, we can do this. This is going to be really, really hard, but we can do this. Ultimately, as a Christian, that's the message I get in the scriptures, both the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian scriptures, which is that at the end of the day, we know how this ends. It ends with love winning. It ends with God winning. And whatever else we have to go through between now and then, that is how it's going to end. And so I think I think even just as one person, perhaps to your spouse or to your next door neighbor or to someone you're talking with, we can actually, on some days, we're in a good enough place that we can be the person reassuring someone else that as hard as this is, and perhaps as bad as it's going to get, and worse than we've seen so far, it's still going to be okay. And for me, it's not true for everyone, but for me, that comes out of my belief that at the end of the day, God and God's reign wins, which means love wins. And I can so easily forget it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in this day and time, it might be the very best contribution we can make in this time of pandemic. We've got to go. Our time is up.
I didn't know what we were going to talk about for an hour, so we did a good job.
We filled it anyway, didn't we? I can't tell you how we are hoping that you and the band are here next August 4th with us, and maybe we can drag a couple of them onto the dais at the Hall of Philosophy and have at it again. Continue this conversation. Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us. I know that all your fans out there, all your Chautauqua fans, appreciate this, and will feel even closer to you as they enjoy you performing next summer, we hope. And best wishes to you and your family, and especially blessings on Hallie as she continues to live her life in the moment. May we be like her in that way.
Thank you so much, Gene. And to all our Chautauqua friends, it's one of those special places we get to be and spend some time. And it's like we have a bunch of hometowns all over the country, and Chautauqua is one of them. So this has been an honor for me and a great privilege, and it's been a lot of fun. So thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you, Bob. And thank you to all of you here on CHQ Assembly. We've got lots going on. Explore the website, find out all the ways that you can participate with us, and have a really good day.
Jesus said, love God with all you have, love thy neighbor as thyself.
You just spent more than an hour of your day listening to this conversation, and for that we're grateful. We'd love to continue the conversation by social media, so you can contact us at Bob Crawford Base, at RevBrez, or through the show's social media at RTN Theology. We'd love to hear the ways that you're experiencing these conversations, the ways that you're sharing them and sparking new conversations, the ways that you're building community, and any ideas you might have for future guests or topics. If you enjoyed this episode, you might enjoy digging back through some of the old ones, and for this we'll send you way back to some of the more kind of confessional testimony episodes, like episode 3, which was a live taping with Kate Bowler about her book Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies That I've Loved, or episode 7, where Bob shares about his remembering of Walter B. Jones upon his death, or episode 15 with our friend Rochelle Parham about her book, Mythical Me. Audio for this episode comes to us courtesy of the Chautauqua Institute, and for that we're very thankful. Check out their programming. And special music comes to us from the Pharaoh sisters, making beautiful sacred folk music out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Check out their record, which sounds beautiful and looks beautiful. They have a version of it in pale green vinyl that you can purchase on their website, and you can stream their music wherever you find it. The liner notes suggest that some of their influences come from Charles Taylor and Eugene Peterson. I couldn't be more for those sorts of influences on their music.
Our intro music is A.A. Gray and 7 Foot Dilly, The Old Ark's A-Movin'. And we love to end our show with David Childers' Jesus Said. Please remember to rate us on iTunes and write a review, subscribe to our podcast, and follow us on socials. And please, please, please share this episode with a friend. Until next time, take care.